Can I ask you a little bit about the way that you constructed your own family and career pathway? Because I've been working with my wife trying to sketch out, she does a podcast on issues related to femininity. And we've been trying to sketch out, at least hypothetically, something like a appropriate timeline for young women, because they have no real guidance in that. So here's a stat for you. We hit this milestone last year. Half of Western women 30 and under have no child. So it's a little more than half now. So we hit more than half. Half of them will never have a child. And 90% of them will regret it. That means we're setting up, this is a catastrophe. This is a catastrophe if it's true, and the data are pretty clear, I believe. This means we're setting up 1 woman in 4 for isolation, right? And that gets increasingly brutal as you get older. And I also think we're setting up that 25% of women to be preyed upon in a manner like nothing we've ever seen when they enter their later years, because they'll have no one to keep an eye out for them, especially during times of vulnerability. This is not going to be good. So let me sketch out an idea for you in terms of a timeline and tell me what you think about that. I mean, 1 couple in 3 have fertility problems by the age of 30. And that's defined as not being able to conceive within a year of trying.
Right.
And so it seems pretty obvious. All assistive reproductive technology notwithstanding, which is very expensive and very unreliable and certainly not something to be depended on except in cases of absolute necessity. Having your children before you're 30 is a wise move if you want to ensure that it's going to happen. And so then the question is order. We're best served probably as human beings to have our children in our 20s and probably our early 20s. And of course, that's going to be more demanding for women, more demanding and more of an opportunity, I would say, because each child really requires something approximating 3 years of pretty dedicated care. The data seem to show that if your child is 3 and reasonably social, then social education, daycare, can work. Before that, especially with transformation of caregivers, it doesn't look like it's a very good idea. So you need 3 years per child. And maybe you want 2 children or 3 children. And so that's something like, 5 or 6 years that you have to devote to it. Now, women live about 6 or 7 years longer than men. So that's kind of an interesting little twist on the whole situation. And if you started your career at 30, you could have 40 years of career, which is a lot. And that way, I would say, in some ways, you get to have your cake and eat it too, although perhaps not at the same time, which we had talked about early. But there are no real guidelines developmentally for young women, and they don't know what to do. And they're increasingly not married, and they increasingly don't have children, and they're increasingly unhappy. And it doesn't look to me like slave to a corporation is necessarily a substitute for family life and children. Now, some people have a career, you have a career, some people have a career, most people have jobs. So anyways, I'm not saying that that's a hard and fast rule, but I don't really see any way around it. And here's another little twist that is worth adding. I think most people who are popular and attractive get 5 chances to establish a permanent relationship, and that's about it.
That's fascinating.
Right.
That's
well, figure it's a year to kind of get to know someone.
Yeah.
And then assume that, you're fortunate enough so that people are lining up, which is not that likely and probably not the position that most people are in.
Right.
And so maybe it's 2 years, including the failure, and 5 is a 10-year span. I'm not trying to be overwhelmingly pessimistic, but I wouldn't say it gets easier as you get older. You get more different from other people. It isn't easier to establish a relationship when you're older, I wouldn't say.
And more
Plus,
people are snatched up.
Well, there's that. That's a big problem. Who's left? And the other issue I would say too that's germane is, why wouldn't you want to spend your young years with the person that you want to be with? You're going to forestall that for what reason? I got married to Tammy when I was 27, I think, and one of our regrets is that we didn't do that earlier. Now, there were reasons for that, and maybe they were valid. Probably they weren't. But I'm not happy that time was missed. It would have been better to have spent it together. So I'd like your thoughts on that. I mean, the timeline, just that general layout.
I mean, I think there's no problem in setting out those honest truths, which are your life will be happier if you have a partner and children. I just think that's just true. And people should be told that. And then they should be told the realities of fertility, because those are realities that, can be potentially meddled with, but there's no guarantee. And if you're one of the people who cannot meddle with it and you missed your window, it will be a lifelong regret that will be unsolvable and will be like a deep source of pain, an ongoing deep source of pain. So it's not something that you could easily brush off. And so all those truths need to be shared while at the same time prizing and sharing the fullness of the rewards of motherhood with young women, which isn't done. That's the other piece of it. Like if you listen to Jordan, if you listen to Ben, if you listen to, the Daily Wire, you'll hear that. You won't hear motherhood, early motherhood, or any kind of motherhood generally bashed. You'll hear it praised. But in society still, in the movies, on the television shows that women watch, it's not. You still hear she's just a stay-at-home mom, or she doesn't work. They still don't look at, motherhood as something that's, something valuable, like work as though it's a bad word. Motherhood is work too. It's great work. It's life-fulfilling work. But it still has this and women who I know all over New York, and now I'm in Connecticut, they say things like, it's very important to me that my daughter see me going to a business meeting. Like mommy's got a business meeting, or going to the office if they have just like some small meeting. And I'm like, why? Why? Because they don't think the daughter will think that they're important if they don't have some sort of business pressing on them, which is absurd and # part of the problem, right? Like, no, we all need to be teaching young girls and boys that motherhood is enough. Like being a mother is a completely valid, beautiful, awesome, really important choice. I actually went to my daughter's school and I said, I think it's fine you have career night. It's an all-girls school. And you bring in doctors and lawyers and journalists and whomever. You need to bring in a stay-at-home mom. You need to have somebody stand up there and tell the girls, I made a totally different choice. And so much the better if she's got a great education. And she can say, I have all the same skills you have. And I was on the exact same path as you were. And I loved learning and being introduced to the classics and being able to sit around a dinner table with so-called intellectuals and know the references. And I chose a totally different path when I graduated from those schools, because there was one thing that was most important to me. And let me tell you how that's rewarded me. The school did not do it. Okay. So, we've got a counter program at home. So having said all that, I'll tell you my own personal experience, which doesn't really reflect that way of thinking or this recommended course at all. And yet still, I'm very, very happy. I'm a very contented person. Happy is a charged word, but I really am very happy with my life. I'm contented. I have a very, very strong marriage and extremely intact, loving, present, and meaningful relationships with my 3 kids. But I also have a very large career that's been hugely successful. Not to be self-aggrandizing, I'm just saying, like on the scales of careers, mine has worked out very well. So in no way did I really sacrifice much in that lane. And I realize this puts me in the 0.00001% of people, and probably even fewer percent of women. So the way that I did it was not that unconventional for when I grew up. I was definitely part of a generation that felt you work. You get to work. You graduate from college, go to college, but when you finish college, you work. That's the thing you do. But in my case, Jordan, from that day to this, I've always loved working. I love it. It's totally exciting and interesting and intellectually stimulating to me. And I cannot imagine not doing this. It's been really important to me. And if I looked at the 21 or 22-year-old version of me versus me now, or let's say when I had my kids, which was later, 38, 40, and 42, I guarantee you, I personally, this isn't true of everybody, but I personally would not have been anywhere near as good a mother. I was much more selfish and less capable of giving. And, I was more of a taker, like most young people are. Not all, but most. And so I really think that the calm I've brought to motherhood, the life lessons, the wisdom, has been a boon to my children who are calm and cool and not panickers and have a wisdom about them that I think you kind of get through osmosis and maybe some genetics. But they're in a very good place, I think, in part thanks to the fact that it's not age related for everybody, but for me, I didn't reach that place in my life until I was older. And unfortunately, it wasn't planned this way because I didn't meet my husband until we were 35. But unfortunately, and believe me, I think about it all the time, it means that my children and I have a shorter runway together. And I hate that fact. It haunts me. I'm so grateful that I have them at all, unlike so many women who weren't this fortunate. But I hate the fact that every time we talk about their lives, I'm calculating, it's his age plus 42. That's what I'll be, when my youngest has his children. And boy, my kids better have kids young if they want me to be part of that child's life at all. If I get to be a grandparent. And it's its own special form of pain, Like, would I have traded my career building and doing the things that I love? Because I was a lawyer for the first 10 years and then I switched to journalism. I don't know if I can say that. I didn't meet the right man until I was 35. If Doug had come into my life at 22 and I rejected him, and then we went and married different people and refound each other at 35, that would be really painful. But I don't have that regret. We didn't meet until the time I think God brought us together. And for me, that was the time. That's when I was ready. I was ready to not downshift in my career exactly, but to make compromises in my career that I hadn't been prior to that. And I was fully committed to devoting myself to motherhood in a way I never had been before. And some of it was born of the intense love that I had for my husband and still have, in which my kids were born into, this swath of like truly mad romantic love that they're products of and are immersed in every day, which is probably the best medicine for them. So I have no regrets about how I did it, but I also acknowledge it's not all roses and unicorns. There are downsides to doing it the way I did.